Something was standing outside my cabin at midnight. It was 7 feet tall. It was standing completely still in the darkness, and it already knew my name. My name is Marcus Windrider. For 8 years, I worked as a park ranger deep in the Hayawa National Forest in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. I knew those woods better than I knew my own face in a mirror. I knew where the black bears denned every winter. I knew which beaver ponds held the biggest fish. I knew the exact trails the wolves used between their summer and winter ranges. That forest was not just my job, it was my identity, my home, the one place in this world where I felt completely safe. I was wrong to feel that way. What happened during those 6 nights in November changed everything I thought I knew about the natural world, and about what lives inside the dark spaces between the trees. It started on the morning of November the 8th. I woke at 5:30, made coffee in the old percolator my father had given me before he died, and stood at the kitchen window watching the darkness thin toward gray. The thermometer on the porch read 26 degrees, cold enough to firm up the ground. Perfect tracking weather. By 6:15, I was in my truck, running my standard November route. 6 registered hunting camps, spread across 40,000 acres of forest, each one needing a quick permit check and safety visit. The farthest out was Branson Camp, 12 miles from my cabin on roads that barely deserve the name. 3 generations of the Branson family had been running hunters through that camp. Good, solid country people who knew these woods. That morning, something had frightened them badly. The call came through the radio at 7:40. Mike Branson's voice had that particular mix of annoyance and confusion that usually meant something minor had gone wrong. But what he described was not minor. Every single bait pile around the camp had been destroyed overnight. Corn scattered across a 20-foot radius, apples smashed and flung, sugar beets torn apart like they had been put through a wood chipper, and nothing had been eaten, not one piece. In 8 years, I had never heard of anything like that. Deer, bears, coyotes. Every animal in those woods was drawn to bait piles. Whatever had torn through those stations had not been hunting for food. It had been doing something else entirely. Then Mike said something that made me go cold. His 2 walker hounds, seasoned hunting dogs that had tracked wounded deer through swamps and across entire highways, would not leave the cabin. They were pressed against the back wall, shaking. Those animals did not scare. Something had terrified them beyond reason. I told him I would be there in 45 minutes and drove deeper into the forest. About a quarter mile from the camp, I stopped to check a frozen puddle in the road. I switched off the engine, and I heard the silence. Not ordinary morning quiet, something heavier, something wrong. No chickadees calling their 2-note songs, no ravens croaking in the distance, no squirrels chattering warnings at my intrusion. Every living thing in that forest had gone completely still, as if the world itself was holding its breath before something terrible happened. I stood with my door open for 30 full seconds, listening hard. Then I got back into that truck and locked the door. In 8 years of working those woods, I had never once locked my door. I locked it that morning before I even understood why. Hey, if you are new here, welcome to Mr. Dark Whisper. Hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's get back to Marcus, because it is about to get much worse. The damage at the camp was worse than Mike had described. I crouched at the main bait pile and found tracks at the edge of the scatter pattern, partially frozen but clear enough to read. Canine prints. Far too large for coyote. Far too large for any gray wolf I had ever tracked in 8 years. The rear paw measured just over 6 inches from heel to toe, with deep claw impressions that spoke of serious weight. But it was the heel that troubled me most. Elongated, almost curved, like something between a wolf and something I had no name for. The largest print was nearly twice the size of any wolf track I had ever seen. I photographed everything. When I stood up, I found myself scanning the tree line automatically, that primitive part of the brain that evolution built for one reason only: to warn you before something kills you. The camp's wildlife biologist dismissed my photographs the following morning. Possibly an injured bear with unusual pad structure, she said. Nothing to worry about. I read her reply 3 times trying to make it fit what I had seen. Bears did not scatter bait piles without eating. Bears did not leave claw impressions like those, and bears did not make seasoned hunting dogs cower against a wall in primal terror. But she was the expert. I told myself she had to be right. On day 3, I set up a trail camera near the main bait pile, an older motion-activated model with solid night vision. It made me feel like I was doing something useful. The hunters had started calling me Jumpy Marcus by then, laughing at my concern. They were men from downstate who came to these woods briefly and then went back to heated houses and paved streets. They did not know this forest. They did not know that silence like that meant something. They did not know that the fear in those hounds' eyes was a warning more reliable than any equipment I owned. I let them laugh. I checked the camera. I drove home at sunset and told myself everything was fine. Day 4 ended that lie completely. I checked the camera footage at 3:47 in the morning. Night vision rendering the clearing in gray-green. The bait pile visible in the center of frame. Then something moved at the edge of the image. A blur, gray-brown and impossibly fast, crossing the entire frame in less than 1 second. Every image after that was static. 4 straight hours of gray electronic noise. Something had passed through that frame and killed the camera from the inside out. The unit was physically intact, but something in that single instant had destroyed its electronics entirely. I zoomed in on the blur as far as my computer would allow. The shape was too tall for a coyote, too broad for any wolf, and it moved in a way that made the proportions look fundamentally, horribly wrong. That afternoon, I loaded my revolver for the first time in 4 years. The hunters stopped laughing at me that same day. Something had shifted. I could see it in their eyes. The silence was getting to them too. Nobody called me Jumpy Marcus that evening, and when I warned them again to stay inside after dark, not one of them argued. I did not sleep that night. The moon was nearly full, throwing silver light through the bare branches around my cabin. More than once, I was certain I saw shapes moving between the trees, shadows that did not match anything that should have been there. But whenever I looked directly, there was nothing, just darkness. Just the forest I had loved for 8 years, suddenly feeling like a place I did not know at all. Day 5. I was back at Branson camp by 6 in the morning. All 4 bait stations had been scattered again overnight, but this time there were new marks. Long gouges running 3 and 4 feet through the frozen mud, claw marks with a spacing of nearly 8 inches across. No wolf produces a paw that size, no bear either. Inside the cabin, the oldest hunter, a heavyset man named Dennis from Flint, told me what had happened the night before. Around 3 in the morning, the dogs had gone absolutely wild, throwing themselves at the door, howling. Tom, a younger hunter, had gone to the window to look. He had seen nothing, not one thing moving in the darkness. And then the dogs stopped, all at once completely, as if a switch had been thrown. Dennis had heard something else, heavy footsteps moving around the cabin, a rhythm that was wrong, like something that should walk on 4 legs trying to manage 2, or the other way around. That description settled into my bones like cold water. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from right now. Mr. Dark Whisper reaches all across the world, and I want to hear from you. Keep watching. The worst is still ahead. I stayed until nightfall, helping them reinforce the window frames. Before I left, I told Mike to keep the radio on through the night and to call me the moment anything happened. The drive home was the longest 12 miles of my life. I pushed the truck faster than those frozen roads safely allowed, my pistol on the seat beside me, checking my mirrors constantly. I made it home, locked every door, pushed the heavy wooden table against the front entrance, loaded the shotgun alongside the pistol, and sat down in my chair by the door. The clock on the wall read 7:47. I sat there and waited. At 11:23, I heard a twig snap outside. I was on my feet before the sound finished, pistol raised, eyes straining through the window glass. The moonlit yard was empty. The birch trees stood pale and still in the silver light. Everything looked exactly as it should. I was about to sit back down when I saw them. Eyes, just eyes. 2 points of amber gold light at the tree line near the big oak at the edge of my property. 40 yards out. Absolutely, terrifyingly motionless. In 8 years, I had learned to read animal eyes in the dark, the way other people read text on a page. Deer glow green or yellow. Wolves reflect silvery white. Bears tend toward red. Every animal carries its own signature. These eyes were none of those colors. They were gold. Not yellow, not amber. Actual gold, like old coins, like something ancient and deeply wrong. And they were too high, at least 7 feet off the ground, maybe more. I stood frozen at that window, caught in that paralysis that prey animals experience when a predator's gaze finds them. The eyes did not blink. They did not waver. They just watched, with an intensity that felt less like hunger and more like recognition, like something that knew exactly who I was. Then they were gone, not turned away, just gone, present 1 second and absent the next, as if whatever owned them had simply stepped out of existence. I did not sleep for a single minute that night. At dawn, I found the tracks near the big oak, the same oversized canine prints, the same handprints pressed deep beside them, and a stride length of 8 full feet between each impression. Whatever had been standing outside my cabin had been walking upright, calmly, deliberately, and it had been there all night. I followed the tracks into the underbrush. 50 yards in, they stopped completely. No turn, no climb, no crossing. They simply ended. And that was when I heard it. A low, rumbling vocalization from somewhere deep in the trees to my left. Not quite a growl, not quite a word. Something that vibrated through my chest instead of entering through my ears. I spun toward it with my pistol raised. Nothing was there. But just before the sound faded, I heard something else rising inside it. Something that was almost laughter. A huffing, rhythmic sound carrying no joy. Only a terrible knowing intelligence. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the trees, refusing to run. Running felt like the wrong choice. The prey choice. I made it back to my cabin, locked the door, stood with my back against the wood for a long time, listening to my own breathing. The radio crackled to life and Mike's voice came through. Strained, strange, stripped of all its earlier confidence. "Get out here, Marcus. You need to see this yourself." I drove to the camp and found the hunters standing outside in the cold, staring up at the ridge that overlooked the clearing. And on that ridge, silhouetted against the gray morning sky, was the thing I had been trying not to believe in. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but no man had ever looked like that. 8 feet tall, shoulders as broad as a doorframe, its entire body covered in coarse gray-brown fur, arms that hung past its knees, ending in hands, 5 fingers, too long, too thin, tipped with claws like curved black knives, and the head, a wolf's skull but stretched wrong, the snout too long, the brow ridge too heavy, the ears too large, pricked sharply forward. It stood completely still on that ridge, outlined against the clouds, and it watched us. Not the way an animal watches, the way something intelligent watches. Something calculating, something that had chosen this exact moment to let us see it. Then it dropped forward onto all 4s with a fluid grace that turned my stomach, moved along the ridge for 50 yards, and simply vanished into the trees without a single sound. The hunters erupted in panicked voices behind me. I did not answer them, because standing in that frozen clearing, I was finally facing the truth I had been running from for 5 days. That thing had wanted us to see it. That was not the behavior of a predator stalking prey. It was a demonstration. It was a message. Look at what I am. Look at what you are dealing with. I see you. And there is nowhere in these woods you can go that I cannot follow. That night, it came to my cabin. I heard it first, a low howling from somewhere to the east, rising and falling in patterns that were almost like speech. Wrong and broken, like something that had learned to howl by listening to wolves, but had never quite gotten it right. And buried inside that sound, stretched and distorted, but absolutely unmistakable, was my name. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. I was on my feet with both weapons raised before I had fully processed what I was hearing. The howling circled the cabin, growing closer, surrounding me from every direction until I could not tell where it was coming from. Then it stopped. And the silence that followed was the worst silence I had ever experienced. Something slammed into the cabin wall hard enough to shake the entire structure. Then another impact from the opposite side. Then the roof. Something landing directly above me with a force that showered dust from the ceiling beams. It was circling me faster than anything should have been able to move, hitting the walls one after another in rapid succession. Then that too stopped. And from just outside my front door, in a voice that was deep and rumbling and layered with other voices underneath it like a terrible chorus, I heard my name spoken one final time. Not howled, spoken. And then it laughed. I do not have a word for that sound. It was a series of short, barking coughs, rhythmic and harsh, carrying no warmth, no joy, only the satisfaction of something that was entirely in control of the situation and knew it. It was playing with me, and it wanted me to know that. The next morning, I found my old flannel shirt, the blue and gray one I had worn on patrol 3 days earlier, the one that had been hanging on the hook inside my cabin door, spread across the hood of my truck. 3 long parallel tears ran down the back of the fabric, the exact same marks I had seen on the hunting blind's railing. The creature had entered my cabin, had taken something of mine, had shredded it with those impossible claws and left it there for me to find. The message was clear. I can reach you whenever I want. There is nothing between us that I cannot remove. Something shifted inside me when I held that ruined shirt. The fear was still there, but underneath it, rising up from somewhere I had not known existed, was anger. Pure, focused, hot. I was done being prey. By the time I reached Branson camp that afternoon, 2 of the hunters had already fled. Mike and 2 others, Dennis and Carl, had stayed. Mike because his father had never once let fear close that camp early. Dennis and Carl because they had nowhere left to run in their minds. It had walked out of the tree line while the others were packing their vehicles, stood upright and still at the edge of the clearing, and watched them drive away, making sure they saw it, making sure they understood that they were only leaving because it was allowing them to leave. We drove back to my cabin together. We reinforced every door. We took turns on watch through the night, 2 people awake at all times, weapons ready, lights burning in every room. It did not matter. Around 3 in the morning, Dennis looked out the window, and it was standing in the moonlit clearing, all of it visible. Every impossible detail rendered in sharp silver light. 8 feet of muscle and fur and ancient intelligence. Arms too long, hands with claws like knives. A wolf's skull on a body built for something no naturalist had ever cataloged. And eyes burning amber gold in the darkness, fixed on the window, fixed on me. It crossed from the clearing to my front door in a blur. The impact split the wood down the center. I could smell it through the gap, copper and rot and old musk. We ran for the bedroom window. We dropped into the darkness outside and ran for the trees. Dennis fell 50 yards in, his ankle broken, and told me to leave him. I ran. I heard what happened to Dennis behind me in the darkness. I will not describe that sound. Carl broke next, stood up from cover and sprinted, and was taken in an instant, snatched from the air without a sound. Mike and I made it to a ranger station half a mile east, pulled a propane tank to the door, and when that creature came through the wall, I lit the gas, and we threw ourselves through the window. The explosion behind us was enormous. But when I looked back from the road as my truck fishtailed away through the darkness, it was still standing at the tree line, burned, wounded, but standing. Those amber eyes caught the firelight and glowed like coals. And then the road curved and the forest swallowed it, and I drove 40 miles without stopping or speaking a single word. That was 3 years ago. The official report said bear attack. The investigation closed in 2 weeks. I resigned from the Park Service. I sold my cabin. I moved to a 3rd-floor apartment in a city where no trees are visible from any window. I sleep with the lights on and a loaded shotgun within reach. Every November when hunting season opens, I take vacation days and stay inside with the curtains drawn. I do not know what that creature was. I have read everything. Folklore, field reports, accounts from people across the country who describe something similar. None of the names feel right. None of the descriptions capture what I saw in those eyes. That calculated intelligence, that deliberate cruelty, that patience. It was not hunting us out of hunger. It was hunting us because it chose to. because it could. Some nights I hear howling, faint and distant, probably just my imagination, probably just a stray dog somewhere in the city, but it sounds like the howling I heard in those woods. And when I hear it, I check every lock on every door and window, and I remind myself that I survived. It does not feel like victory. It feels like borrowed time, like it simply decided to let me go, like the hunt is not finished, like it is still out there somewhere in those frozen forests, patient and watchful and remembering my name, waiting for me to finally believe that I am safe. I will never believe that again. My name is Marcus Windrider. I was a park ranger in the Hayawa National Forest. For 6 nights in November, something that wore a wolf's shape, but was not a wolf, hunted us through the dark. 2 men did not come home. I did. And I have never once felt safe since that night. Not truly, not all the way. If you are watching this from somewhere deep in the country, if you are in a place where the trees press close and the silence falls heavy at night, pay attention to that silence. It is trying to tell you something. Like those buttons below this video, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? Because wherever you are, I want you to stay safe. This is Mr. Dark Whisper, and the dark always has more to whisper.